Hi, everybody. It's CC and JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour. And on our podcast, we've opened up our podcast to interview authors and writers from across the country and around the world. And boy, we're having a lot of fun. We're getting some really interesting perspectives and some interesting writing stats. And we've been going really all over the nation. And then we went, like for this interview, we went maybe 2 whole miles from somebody in our own hometown of Carson City, Nevada. So CC and JT would like to welcome Kendall Brown. Hello, Kendall.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So thankful for having you coming on board. Kendall is the writer of 2 books, 10 Secrets of a Lazy Dog Trainer and Let's Get a Dog. And that's all I'm going to talk about here. You go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce your books to our audience, please.
Oh, I'm delighted to. Well, my name is Kendall Brown, in case you didn't catch that. I am a dog trainer, so I run and own my own business, Custom Canine Service Dogs, based out of Carson City. And in addition, I also write books about dog training. So my first book is essentially a philosophical approach to dog training. So like my husband and I's 10 secrets, we call them, or philosophy and training techniques that we think that everybody should know, whether they're professionals or, novices with dog training. And then my next book is all about ideally what happens before you get a dog. So I'm trying to change the dog culture where, you are reading and researching and doing a lot of soul searching. That way, when you go about getting your dog, you're on the right track. It's a smooth fit. It's a perfect marriage. So that's what my second book is about.
That's excellent. And here comes the compliment. When I opened up your book, first of all, your entire press package and all of your materials are very professional.
Thank you.
One mistake that independent writers make, self-published writers make, and even traditional writers make, is they don't have a reasonable press package ready to go. When somebody calls them and says, "Hey, I want to do this. Send me your press package." Yours was well prepared, well organized, and it was very, very easy to work.
Oh,
So, first of all, so thank you for that. The
thank
other
you.
thing, which I think is more important, is that when I went through your Lazy Dog Trainer book, and I'm going to give you the highest compliment here because your writing style, where you combine teaching moments, anecdotes, your thoughts, and the strong, and I don't want to say bad or good owners. What I want to say is strong and weak owners reminded me quite a bit of James Herriot and the all the creatures great and small. Are you familiar with those books?
Actually, that's why I started writing. I grew up on a 30-foot sailboat, and my mom brought along all of his books. And so she would read them to us all the time. And I loved how his narration can combine, real life and death and sadness and loss and joy, and also convey information. So that was my goal. So that is the truly highest compliment you could ever give me.
And it's totally intentional because as I was reading that, I could just see Dr. Herriot
Oh,
in a similar situation, talking to owners who quote unquote should know better, and owners who are doing their best, but there's not a perfect match, or more importantly, they don't have a plan. And I think that's where you come in, where they don't have a plan to make their best friend their most able friend, their most. I want to say, I'm not sure if I'm saying the right word or what you mean, but there are dogs which live with you and enrich your life, and there are dogs that just have you every day doing one of these things. Oh my God, what now? And so, how you were able to combine all that in what you sent? Well, I thought, hey, this is all creatures great and small version dog.
that makes me so pleased. I'm very glad. I don't think anyone is born knowing how to train dogs. And that was something that, I've tried to incorporate in my training style when I work with clients in person, in my writing, and in like any interviews or any lectures that I'm giving. No one comes to the table saying, I want to be a really bad dog owner. They come to the table just trying to do their best. And it's our job as teachers and trainers to just kind of help them have the options and guide them. So I'm glad.
No, I have to agree with what JT said about your writing style. It's just absolutely wonderful. And my question is, I noticed you also do a monthly column for our local paper, the Nevada Appeal. So do you find writing for your books a lot different from writing those articles?
I think in my books, I have the advantage of foresight. Like I know where my book is going to go, so I can layer information a little more carefully. When I have like a newspaper column that I'm answering questions for, sometimes, I won't know what the questions are before they get to me. It's a tighter turnaround and it's a shorter, I can't spend a whole chapter explaining and delving. So actually one of the challenges in writing in a column is I have to kind of self-edit and think like, I really want to go into like this one philosophy behind why your dog is doing this, or give you 3 different alternative training styles, but I can't. I can only react off of what the person who wrote into me has given me. So that has been probably one of the coolest things about writing for newspapers, and like doing, like my husband and I just did last week, we did an interview for Colo, ate the morning break, and they did a segment with us on the most important things to know about hiking and camping behaviors. Well, my husband and I are in the car and we're like, it's only like 10 minutes. I mean, we can't even scratch the surface. We could spend 8 hours talking about come and leave it and, distance and demeanors and distractions. So it was challenging. So just like in a column, right, you have to just like make it smaller. Right. So it's been challenging figuring out what the general public needs to know, like what would be the most bang for their buck and get them the most results from a short segment, and then also let go of the desire as a teacher. I'm sure you know this, right? It's the desire of a teacher to teach to the extent that you can.
So with that in mind, do you have any plans on maybe in the future turning some of those columns or the topics from those columns to future books?
Absolutely. I think the newspaper columns kind of give you a way to see what the general public is really asking. I can give you a list of topics as a dog trainer that I think people should know, but when we opened up, our business and we asked readers, like, tell me what you want to know, and we got all these answers, it was pretty cool. So I totally think a collection of, really quick, down and dirty, 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph answers would be fun.
Definitely. That's kind of a nice format to write to, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Kendall, the question that all of us writers get, and this is kind of self-answering because I like dogs and I like dogs to the hip, but what was your actual writing inspiration? I mean, you obviously have a lifetime of living with dogs, but there is a noticeable gap from living with dogs and training your own dogs and shaping their lives to sitting down at a keyboard and putting out X number thousands of words. There's a gap there. There's a real gap there between this reality and that reality. So how did you bridge that gap? Where did that come from?
Well, I actually grew up on a 30-foot boat in Central and South America, so I didn't grow up with dogs. I didn't know anything about dogs, really. I just was raised reading about dogs. So I think I kind of approached it from a cool angle. Like, my interactions with dogs at first were from, Little House on the Prairie with their dog Jack and Ribsy. And, I grew up learning about dogs through stories. And then when I was in college, I'm epileptic and I have hemiplegic migraine. So I trained my first service dog as a sophomore in college, and I did it all wrong. Not to say that I did it poorly. I started with a rescue that was 5 years old with bad hip dysplasia, and I didn't really know what I was doing. There weren't a lot of resources out there to help people. So that was the inspiration to starting my company. And then it was a pretty natural leap, it felt, to be, in the physical realm of working with dogs, but to feel the lack of stories. There wasn't a follow through, I felt, in our teaching style where we could bring our memoirs and our own personal experiences into the teaching world. And so it took me quite a few years actually, to sit down and write, but it was a very easy jump once I made it.
That's excellent. So let's take a minute to sell Kendall Brown's books. So tell us about your websites, tell us about your social media, and tell us where we can find your books.
Well, you can buy them on Amazon in paperback, hardback, and Kindle format. I'm also on Ingram Sparks, so we also sell at Barnes & Nobles and, to bookstores directly. My social media, I do try and upkeep it. It's one of the biggest challenges, I think, as a reader or as an author, is trying not to feel too self-congratulatory. It's been difficult to kind of advertise and advocate for myself. And so I try and run like right now I'm running a Ask a Dog Trainer and Ask an Author kind of forum, so that's been pretty cool. You can find me on Instagram at KB Secrets of a Lazy Dog Trainer, and on Facebook at Custom Canine Service Dogs. As you can tell though, right, I didn't grow up really using social media, so for me, forcing myself to use social media and to be a web presence, I don't know if it's my generation, but it's not as natural, and so I've really had to dedicate time to learn how to use those sites. And I think still I'm not as good as some of my clients, their fingers just whoo over the keyboards.
No, and we totally respect that. We've been doing the social media thing, and it's no guarantee of success. It really isn't. So, time is our most valuable resource, and it sounds like you've got your time taken up.
I do a lot of the 80-20 rule, where I think it's 20% or 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. Because I have my fingers in so many pies as a business owner and a Marine Corps wife, and ideally, also a good friend and a contributing member of society, I've had to really sit down and dedicate myself to what that 20% is. And for me personally, it hasn't really been through social media. I find I connect more with readers in the face-to-face avenue. It is pretty cool though. We interact quite a bit with people who are training dogs across the states. And so seeing our books on their curriculums and being able to send them the ideas and chapters of it is pretty cool.
Excellent. CC, why don't we dive into the questions?
Okay. These questions are based a little bit on the Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton, where he would ask a series of questions of actors at the end of his episodes. We tweak them a little bit for authors. The first question is, what was your I am a real honest-to-goodness writer moment?
I was on a plane traveling with one of the service dogs that we were raising, because that's a big part of our business. So we raise service dogs from 8 weeks to 14 months. So I was sitting on a plane with the service dog we were training, and I look across and there's somebody reading my book. And
cool.
It was like I was like frozen, and I was just like staring at my face on the back of the cover, and I got super awkward, and she saw me staring at her and like stared back at me politely, and I just stared at her and she looked at me and she was like, Are you this? And I was like, yes! Oh my God, that's me! It was just really funny. I think sometimes when we talk and holding my book for the first time was cool, but seeing somebody who wasn't a client of mine who chose to buy it and was having fun. She was telling me, she's like, I was laughing at this section and I really liked this one. And I think that for me was like, I was like, oh my goodness, like that's my ideas. That's me. It's a piece of me sitting there in her hands. So that was pretty cool. I think I laughed like a little girl the whole trip. I was just so tickled pink.
That's amazing.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. Who is your writing role model and why?
I'd have to go with James Herriot, and I have it written down, so this wasn't staged. Actually, I have all of his books, and I've really studied his writing style, because my first time I sat down to write my first book, I spent forever at it. I spent like 8 months writing it, and I finally plunked this 9,000 page, it was like 98,000 page manuscript on my husband's desk, and I was like, read it. And he read the first chapter, and then being my husband, he came back into the room. And I was like, did you like it? And he was like, I hated it. And I was like, what do you don't like it? And he was like, it's not you. It doesn't sound like you. And so when I sat down and I just let myself write, I found that I really am drawn to the James Herriot, style of first person, and he makes friends with his readers, and he laughs at himself. He makes jokes at his own expense. He's not the smartest person in the room, and I'm very aware of that. And so that, I think, like really affected my writing style, and he's just an incredibly cool person anyways, like if you read about his life.
Yeah, and like I said, when I opened up the document, I said, oh, here we go. This is good.
I'm delighted. It's pretty cool.
You have a couple of fellow James Herriot fans here.
I'm delighted. We really love his pulling in of different characters. Like he tries to paint you into his world. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in dog training, we do deal with so many cool characters, and even people in other professions, like who work with pets, like groomers and veterinarians. And then it was really cool because I can start to pull in, I do change the dogs' names, but I can pull in past clients of ours, and then there will be something that resonates with a current client who will be like, I am like that person, or ooh, in that chapter you talked about that dog. Whatever happened to that? So it just is another way to break the ice, make it a little less formal.
It's really cool. So what do you love about writing?
I love the creativity. I think that, maybe that's a normal answer or a bland answer, but I love being able to sit down and create a world for my reader and then figure out what message I want them to be taken along with. So I love the process from the outlining. I'm one of those horrible people who outlines to creating the cover. I actually start first by creating the cover, and then I work from there. And so I kind of figure out my start and my end point. And then my theme, of course, is all throughout. It's like no one's born knowing this stuff. So you don't have to come into the book defensive or braced to be lectured at. So for me, that part where I'm bringing my ideas and I'm condensing them into the real world just makes me so enthralled. I'm just so energetic when I do it versus like when I have to proofread and I'm like, that.
Which leads nicely into the next question about what do you absolutely dread about writing?
I dislike the first draft because I'm a perfectionist and I'm recovering. I am working my way through it. But it really bothers me when I have my work critiqued at first. And it makes me feel like I'm a fraud. I go the whole route. I go, what do I even know about dog training? You know, I'm just, no one's interested in this story. Well, who am I to even publish a book? And so that first draft that I set out is usually one that I'm like, my toes are curled, I'm like braced for the feedback, which generally is not bad at all. People are like, oh, well, I think this sentence is a little too long. Or they're like, ooh, you put an extra comma. It's usually grammatical. It's pretty much proofreading. I hate proofreading.
Okay, so the next question, what single significant life experience affects your writing for good or bad?
I would have to say that when I was in college and I raised and trained my first service dog, that was a pretty challenging experience to go through. I didn't feel like there was a lot of support for young college kids trying to raise and train their own service dog. It was difficult to feel authentic and like I knew what I was doing, because I didn't for a large part. And there wasn't a lot of books or programs. And so that really spurred on when I started my company. I wanted to make it one-on-one, very individual, very heart-to-heart. It's changed the way that I train. I try not to just have one style. I dabble in all different types, because what works for my cowboy down in Minden doesn't work for my techie up in Reno, and vice versa. So that really impacted my approach to dog training. And then I think just bringing that into my books, because there are lots of people who turn to literature, to learn how to dog train, and then they get bogged down. I have huge bookshelves full of dog training books that you have to read with a dictionary in hand, because it's just so much. So whenever I get a little overwhelmed or whenever I find myself into a subject, I try and remember that there are going to be people like myself who are just trying to get through life. They're trying to do their best by their dog, and they could benefit from that style.
Well, that's really cool. That's a great idea, because we do sometimes get a little too bogged down, I think, in the details when we're writing. So it's a good reminder to all of us. Got to find the balance. So would you recommend the writing life to a loved one, and why?
I think I would recommend that a loved one finds their writing style, their writing life, because my writing life might not suit them. But I find that I really work well on 5 or 7 hour days for 1 month at a time, just sitting down and really pounding out a rough draft. But I know friends of mine who that would just drive them absolutely nuts. So I would recommend it, but only if they followed through and really discovered, like, are they into cycle syncing? Do they want to do, one chapter and then fix everything in that chapter, then move on? Or are they more of a creator in the series and then they have to start from backwards? Like they start at the end and work their way in.
That's really fascinating. I think we all approach writing very differently, so that's a good thought to we have family members who also write, and we all, I think, write very differently. So okay, so this is the fun question, our final question here, and this is the one where we get some really interesting answers. What is something unexpected in your past that we won't see in your bio?
Well, I would tell you that my first pet I had was a 3-toed sloth named Pippin. Growing up on a boat in Central and South America, we couldn't have dogs. And so I think at one point we had a parrot named Ray who bit us to death. Just was a nasty little creature. He was ornery. And so we got a 3-toed sloth that the Navy SEALs gave us because my dad was building a marina down in Shelter Bay in Panama. And they knocked on our boat at 3 a.m. and they had been doing night rainforest exercises. So they had their NVGs on and they knock on our boat and my dad pokes his head out to see what's going on. And they had this baby two-toed sloth just wrapped up in his glove, and he gave it to my dad, and they think a harpy eagle had snatched it off the tree and off its mom because she had really deep wounds on her back. So that was kind of cool. So we cared for her, and she lived quite a long time. And when they filmed one of the James Bond movies, we got to hand the little sloth around, and she would just like hang out on your side, and she would eat these leaves that are covered by tiny little fire ants. So we'd have to go into the woods or in the forest and go pick these leaves off these trees and just be like eating them. Or like, we're getting bit up. So that was my first pet. And then we had a toucan after that named Sherman.
Wow.
Who was also a rescue. It fell out of a tree.
Those are some interesting pets for sure. And then you end up becoming a dog trainer.
Yes, yeah. I can tell you dogs are easier than cats, though. I have lots of clients who request that I train their cats or their husbands, and I'm always like, sorry, cannot do.
Okay, this time flew by so fast. I'm looking at the timer here, and we're up past 23 minutes. I can't believe it was that. It seems like we just started to get to know you. But I do want to thank you for coming on board, Kendall. You have led such a fascinating life, continuing to lead such a fascinating life in your books, and I'm just looking forward to really doing a much deeper dive and reading them, even though I don't know if we're going to have dogs in the near future. It's still funny. It's still fun to read that James Herriot style of life. And so I just want to thank you for your contributions to the literary world in that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you can check out these podcasts and other podcasts on our website, www.carsonhume.com, where we're going to continue to interview fascinating authors like Kendall Brown. You can check us out there, and of course all of our books, and through our bookstore, which is right there. Boom, right there on our front page. So for now, we're signing off here. Take care, Kendall.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting with y'all.
Okay. It was nice meeting you.
Thank you, everybody, for following along. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.